Well, the saga of the empty House Majority Chair has ended, and Kevin McCarthy was finally voted in as the Speaker of the House for the GOP. I have to say that the whole drama was a lot of fun to watch on C-SPAN over the past week, and it became one of the highlights of my vacation, with me waking up every day posting on Facebook. I know, Facebook is for old folks. In Maury Povich voice, Kevin McCarthy, you are still not the Speaker. 14 times. That was great. I was especially excited when deliberations almost came to a real-life fisticuffs match when Representative Richard Hudson, Republican of North Carolina, had to hold Representative Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, back as Rogers appeared ready to drop the MAGA people's elbow on his colleague, Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, for being part of the intransigent coalition of 20 ultra-conservatives, the so-called Freedom Caucus, who repeatedly held up the vote. Disappointingly, no fisticuffs ensued. Kevin McCarthy was finally voted in as Speaker, and all of Trump's men and women seemed to be together again. But what was it that McCarthy finally agreed to that got the far-right caucus to finally vote for him? What we know, according to the publication Axios.com, is that McCarthy agreed to lower the number of members needed to call for a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair from 5 down to 1. McCarthy previously proposed that 5 members could call for a motion to vacate, and this basically makes it easier for the ultra-conservative GOP members to trigger a no-confidence vote in the Speaker, and it keeps McCarthy towing their line if he wants to remain Speaker. Also, they procured a commitment that any effort to raise the debt ceiling must be accompanied by spending cuts, which I think spells a government shutdown in the future when demands to raise the debt limit will come to avoid a government shutdown, because Democrats might oppose spending cuts. I say might because Democrats do not have the spine that even this small group of far-right GOP lawmakers had in holding up the speakership. I think the Dems are likely to put on a show of opposition, but are just as likely to ultimately cave to GOP pressure and cut whatever they say to avoid shutting down the government. But more on Democrats' spinelessness in a bit. McCarthy also agreed that 12 appropriations bills will be voted on individually, as opposed to lumping them all into one omnibus spending bill and voting on that. And the logic for this isn't terrible. As GOP lawmakers say, dropping appropriations bills into an omnibus bill is how lawmakers' pet projects get passed without any oversight. But you and I know Republicans are just as guilty of this as Democrats are, so it's not as if the GOP are being more virtuous in this regard than Democrats. But the MAGA caucus also forced McCarthy to give lawmakers 72 hours to review bills before they come to the House floor, and I hate to agree with Republicans ever, but they're not wrong on this one. Of course, they forced McCarthy to agree to voting for Republican pet project bills relating to abortion, border security, and the like, which he was going to do anyway. But most notably, they also forced a resolution to establish a House Select Committee on, quote, the weaponization of the federal government, end quote. And while that might sound like a nothing burger word salad, what it means is a GOP-led investigation into the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. CNN reports that Republican Representative Chip Roy of Texas, an early holdout against McCarthy, who became a key negotiator for the hardliners, said on Fox News that changes made to the Select Committee proposal, particularly seeking a budget as big as the January 6th Select Committee, was key to getting those initially opposed to McCarthy on board. So we got more resources, more specifically, more power to go after this recalcitrant Biden administration, Roy said on Friday. That's really important. So what this means is this investigation into these agencies will not be to see how they violate the rights of people like, Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, who are expecting indictments against them from the violent FBI raid last year. No, this investigation will be all about the Biden administration using the DOJ and the FBI to investigate Trump. That's it. These folks are not our allies here. They are satisfied, very satisfied, with directing these very agencies to continue coming after the left. And now, speaking of the left, can you imagine what concessions the so-called Progressive Caucus could have won for the people if they had done what the 20 far-right conservatives just did? Instead of immediately caving and voting for Nancy Pelosi to regain her speakership, can you imagine having the Democrats pushing a vote on Medicare for all, student loan debt relief legislation, full distribution of the entire COVID stimulus relief, expanding the child tax credits, or making them permanent in the House? Could you imagine the groundswell of support from the people the Progressive Caucus would have had? The pressure that support would have put on the Democrats in the White House? Do you know what would have happened if the Progressive Caucus had stood firm in their efforts to fight for the people by not voting for the Speaker of the House until the people got something that the members of the Progressive Caucus were elected to fight for? We may not have gotten everything we demanded, but we would have won some concessions from the Democrats. But I know what would have happened for sure. The Democrats would not have lost the House of Representatives in the midterms because progressives would have surged in the polls and won more seats for the party. But imagine, well, that's all we can do. Because the Progressive Caucus, and that includes the squad, didn't fight for anything. Not Medicare for all, not student loan debt relief, not the child tax credits, not the rest of those stimulus checks. Yes, there was a fight to extend the rent moratorium, and that was good, but that was it. They fought for nothing else and caved when Mama Bear Pelosi merely shot them a mean look. Meanwhile, Hakeem Jeffries and two other House Democrats went so far as to form a political action committee to keep progressives from winning against incumbent Democrats in the midterms. And look how all that turned out. The Democrats lost the House of Representatives. But Hakeem Jeffries, well, he was rewarded with the House Minority Speaker position with unanimous votes, all 212 votes, even from members of the Progressive Caucus. Once again, the GOP shows the Democrats up on how to actually use power once you've got it. And the people? Well, we get nothing, as always. Follow Luke My Nation on patreon.com/Luke My Nation for lots of great content.
Those are today's talking points, and you are listening to By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackman, here with Jackie Lukeman, and as always, we're your guide for connecting the political, social, and economic movement shaping the world around us.
By any means necessary.